once again, thank you to our sponsors right across the week for all of our sessions. Without them, we would not be here. Also, 2 reminders. One, of course, for questions. If you have any questions for our panelists, do put your hand up, and I will try and remember to actually bring you in. If you want to join in the conversation online, of course, use the hashtag IGF London. The conversation continues there. So we've talked a little bit about the money, about how the money might help address some of these problems. What are the other key challenges we face as the energy transition gains momentum? What are the latest developments and what lies beyond them? Things like energy storage, distribution, breakthroughs in fusion energy. I want us to look next at the opportunities and challenges in actually diversifying our energy mix, not just relying on renewables. So to set the scene for the new challenge, please welcome Sumant Sinha, who's the founder and chief executive and chairman of Renew India, Rahul Munjal, who's the chairman, managing director at Hero Energies, and also Dr. David Kingham, executive vice chairman at Tokamak Energy. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning to you all. Thank you for being with us. And we talked a little bit earlier, didn't we, Rahul, about green hydrogen. And I'm going to start there if I can, because I'm looking at all the quotes that I've done some research about. The key player in the future of sustainable energy, the most significant technological advancement to make this scalable and economically viable. Give me your assessment of where we are right now, Rahul, on green hydrogen.
If you don't mind, I'm going to take a step back first and talk a little bit about renewables, because I know we're going to talk about green hydrogen a lot more in the panel. Everything we can electrify, we should electrify, because we found a way to decarbonize the grid already through renewables. So I just want to lay it out there. 30 to 40% of emissions come from electricity from the grid, which we can decarbonize. So while hydrogen is important, electrifying what we can is the most important thing, and everything that we've electrified, moving into renewables is equally important. So let's just that be the starting of the conversation. But now moving on, where does green hydrogen come in? Is green hydrogen the silver bullet that we've all been looking for, and does it have the promise that it's all hyped up to be? In certain sectors, yes, it does. For green hydrogen, today, most of India is not built out already, or not built out yet, right? Most of Africa is not built out yet. People need homes, people need roads, schools, hospitals, cement. So there is going to be a lot of C&I sectors. So how do you green cement? How do you green steel? You use hydrogen. What else do you use hydrogen for? Transportation, for shipping. What else can you do with hydrogen? Aeroplanes. So hydrogen has its place, but it's not the only silver bullet that we have, but it's here and now. At least in smaller projects, it's here and now. Large scale, not yet.
That was my question. It has its limitations, though, doesn't it? Talk to me, first of all, about the limitations, and then we might address how we get a bit beyond them.
Yeah. So there are 2 or 3 ways of looking at hydrogen and its limitations. The first is hydrogen is a volatile fuel. We don't know what it doesn't have a smell, it doesn't have an odor. So if there's a leak, it could be dangerous. It's hard to transport. You need to first convert it into ammonia or to methanol. So you can't transport it the way it is. And secondly, the energy density is really, really low. You need 18 vans to transport the same, or 18 lorries or what have you, to transport the same fuel, wherein for diesel you need 1. Yeah. So imagine you have 18 of them pulling into a petrol station rather than just 1. It's a very different ballgame. We've not put our head around. While people say they can store hydrogen, and I'm sure they can, but it's still early days. So first is storage around hydrogen, and the second is the electrolyzers themselves at large scale, and not only at large scale, at high efficiencies are not proven yet. So we're getting there, we're just not there yet.
Sumant, let me bring you in here as well. Where are you most excited about the new developments in renewables? Because there's so much focus on what we might deem to be the traditional renewables. Where are you looking? What is your main focus right now?
Yeah, hi. So I do tend to agree with Rahul a little bit that, one step at a time. And that first step really is to decarbonize the electricity sector. There's a bit of an echo.
Yeah, do you want to try this other one as well? Let's swap
Okay.
these out. Try that one.
Yeah. So first of all, we have to decarbonize the electricity sector as best as possible. And there the news is good in that you have a lot of different kinds of solutions from a cost standpoint that are already cheaper than fossil fuels. The big issue, of course, is there are 2-3 infirmities. One, of course, is the fact that it's variable. The second, that you need to build out the grid much more in most countries, and that is going to take time. But I think there are solutions that are becoming available for firming up renewables, which is the biggest disadvantage. And you can do that, of course, through a combination of wind and solar and some degree of storage. And in India, we've already got now what we call round-the-clock renewable energy projects, where we are able to provide not 30% plant load factor based solutions, but almost 80 to 85% PLF solutions, which is almost like firm power. And we're able to do that at a price that is much cheaper than coal-based power, just by combining wind, solar, and storage together. But we have 2 advantages in India that are not there in most other countries. One, that we have a single grid that links the entire country across its length and breadth. And that means that we can use the best locations in the country for solar and the best locations in the country for wind. And we can combine them together virtually and ship them to some other third part of the country altogether, right? So I think that's one incredible advantage. And the second is that wherever we have overflow power, which you will have in this kind of a product, we can sell that into the merchant market. And there's a very active merchant market right now. And so that allows us to really come up with very different kinds of solutions through renewable energy. So it's not just a question of how you generate the renewable or what source you generate it from, but it's also how you then match it together and use it to create different kinds of products. And it's now got to a point where if the utility asks us to provide peak power or 100% availability at peak times in the morning and peak times in the evening and 50% at all other times, we can sculpt that too. And so that actually takes the ability for us to use renewables and penetrate into the grid to a far superior level than we've had so far. And that in some way addresses one of the biggest problems, right? The second thing, of course, is that in terms of what you said, where am I looking? You know, our sector keeps changing so dramatically and so rapidly on a very regular basis that it's actually quite interesting. 2 years ago, solar module prices were about 20 to 25 cents, coming out of China mostly, right? Today, those prices have fallen to 10 or 11 cents. Who could have anticipated that? Which essentially means the price of solar has come down by almost 40 to 45% in the last 2 years itself. And therefore, the ability to use solar in the grid changes dramatically, right? At the same time, battery prices are also coming down very rapidly. And as that happens, you now have the ability of actually storing more of your solar and extending it out to the evening hours and thereby meeting the evening peak as well. And so, again, the penetration of renewables at low cost is really, really increasing quite substantially. Now, to answer your other question around hydrogen, which of course you'd asked Rahul, but to give you my perspective on that, one of the issues that we have right now is that the reason renewables is successful in the electricity part of the energy segment, but green hydrogen is going to struggle a little bit, is because today renewables is competing, in India at least, with coal-based power, which is a lot more expensive, and therefore we can do all sorts of interesting things that I was talking about earlier with renewables. But in the case of green hydrogen unfortunately is almost 2.5 times the cost of grey hydrogen.
Yeah.
And so the question is, why should anybody want to use green hydrogen if they don't have to? And this is really where government policy comes in. You need to have subsidies on the one hand, or you need to have mandates on the other hand, or a pricing for carbon. And none of those is happening at the speed and pace at which we need right now, unfortunately. And so therefore, you'll see that the German HINDCO tender, the green hydrogen subsidy program there, in Japan, the green hydrogen subsidy program, or in the US, where for other reasons, none of those programs are moving at the pace at which we require.
And I want to come on to the drivers, but also that accessibility, because as you said, it will come down to cost ultimately as well. I want to bring Dr. David in at this point too. And I wonder, David, where does fusion fit into this picture? We've talked a lot about hydrogen and renewables, but where's fusion fit in?
Well, I think many technologies are going to be essential to tackle the increasing demand for energy and the climate change challenge. So we look at India, we think tenfold increase in energy consumption over the next 20 to 30 years, huge decarbonisation challenge, and the technology we're working on, fusion energy, has the capability to be developed and deployed at scale within that 20 to 30 year timeline. and make a big impact on decarbonising. But it is not yet a developed technology. We need collaborations and partnerships internationally to develop it as quickly as possible. So my company, Tokamak Energy, 250 people based just south of Oxford. We've raised about $300 million of capital so far, but this is a multi-$10 billion problem, challenge, and opportunity. At the moment, we're looking for stronger partners in India to help us develop the partnerships necessary to develop and deploy the technology. We already have a great dialogue with the Indian Institute for Plasma Research. It turns out their roadmap towards fusion is very similar to the approach we're taking, and we think that offers potentially great opportunity to accelerate development of fusion energy.
So quite aside from funding, what would those partnerships offer you? What would they look like?
So we're currently engaged in several partnerships around the world. To give you one example, in the US, the US Department of Energy has a milestone-driven fusion development program. And the idea there is that one company comes forward with a technology proposition and gathers around supporters from the national laboratories, from big industry, to develop that technology. And the goal there in 10 years is to get to a 50 megawatt pilot plant. So there's a race between 8 companies. Tokamak Energy is one of them. And we're building that collaboration with that 10-year to a pilot plant goal. In Japan, somewhat different approach. The Japanese government has a moonshot program, or the word moonshot's been mentioned a couple of times already. But the Japanese government have said, it may take a bit longer than other countries think. We want our industry to be positioned well to deploy the technology, but we also want fusion to be useful within 10 years. And so we're involved in partnerships and collaborations there.
So let's talk, and this is applicable to all of you, what is the carrot, what is the stick here in terms of the drivers and incentives for this transition to happen? You talked about cost, but Rahul, what are the drivers and incentives for you?
Yeah, so before we, this is something I spoke about even at the breakfast meeting, and I'll say it again, and something I believe in deeply. I prefer carrots, and I don't prefer sticks. And for a very simple reason, because if you heard the government speak earlier during the day, we want to be inclusive, and the cost needs to come down. And today, not only in India, but most parts of the world, we stay in a very high inflation. These are very high inflationary times.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep the cost down, let's not tax anything. Let's incentivize instead. So you keep the cost down for everybody rather than keep the cost up for everybody.
Can governments afford that though?
But they'll, so the point is between winning elections and losing elections. So maybe they'll want to, especially in this country, right? Because inflation is not in control, and we know how the election is going to go in I guess, a couple of weeks from now. Mm-hmm. So maybe in democracies where inflation is important, they would like to keep it down. And if you want to keep it down, one way is to incentivize rather than tax and make it expensive for everybody. So that's just one thought out there. But having said that, we need to incentivize technologies which are long gestation. Certain technologies like renewables do not need incentives. The kind of programs Sumant just spoke about, the load flow program that we are winning in with wind, solar, battery storage, etc. So we made infirm power into firm power. We do not need incentives for the grid anymore, to decarbonize the grid. But we need the grid. Yep. There is no grid available anywhere in the world. Almost every country in the world that I go to, the two problems are grid connection